Welcome to week 14, April 1st through April 6th, day 91 to day 96 of our chronological Bible study. We're not going to get into the book of Ruth on this video because there's a lot of material to cover in just the book of Judges. This week's reading included the first part of Ruth, and we're going to stop shy of that. This week we find ourselves well within the Judges era. Most of the land of Canaan has been conquered. The second generation of Israelites raised their children in peace and security. Judges 2:10 tells us that after that generation died, that's talking about the second generation, so after the second generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things He had done for Israel. And remember, we talked about last week about it's always the third generation where things start to fall apart. We learned last week, back in Deuteronomy 16, that the Hebrew word for judge is shofet. Deuteronomy 16:18 through 20, the Lord told them in the desert of Sinai, He said, appoint judges and officials for yourselves from each of your tribes and all the towns the Lord your God is giving you. They must judge the people fairly. So this same word that was used for that context of judges back in Deuteronomy, judges in their towns and in their tribes, that same word is used now in the book of Judges for these judges. These judges aren't special because they're judges. They're special because they're judges that the Lord raised up. They're set apart from the rest of the judges. There's lots of judges in the land. It's not like there's just these 12 judges that are in the book of Judges. It's not like those are the only ones in existence. There's lots of judges throughout the land of Israel, but the book of Judges focuses on the ones who are raised up for a specific purpose. We've already learned about the first two judges last week, Othniel from the tribe of Judah and Ehud from the tribe of Benjamin. We've witnessed this week the slow degeneration of this kingdom of priests. Israel was supposed to serve a function, and that was the whole reason why they were brought out of Egypt, and they were hardened in the desert, and the second generation took over the land of Canaan. It was so that they could be a kingdom of priests and serve in that narrow thoroughfare land that everybody had to travel through to go from the continent of Africa to the continent of Europe or over into the Eurasian continent. God purposely set them there on that thoroughfare so that other people would have an opportunity to worship Him, to get to know God, the one true God. So they now, in the third generation, they start to degenerate as a nation. The key verse for studying the book of Judges is repeated a few places throughout it. Judges 17:6 says, in those days Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. And you can see that as a parent, that's what's happening in Judges. Everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes. And it's kind of a reflection of where we're at today in our country, with no objective standard like the Bible to base our morality on. Everything is up for everyone's own decision about the morality of things, and everything becomes subjective. And that can lead to the rationalization of any evil. The fact is, though, that Israel did have a king. They had a king in heaven, and they were living in a theocratic government. God was their king who ruled from heaven. They didn't need an earthly king. And we'll find this out when we get to 1 Samuel next week. He designed them for Him to be their king and the priest to manage the theocratic government for His kingdom of priests who were on earth. We find over in Judges chapter 10 verse 26 that Israel had been living there for 300 years. So when we get to the end of our study today, we'll get near the end of a 300-year period that is called the Judges era. Next year, in 2026, our country will be 250 years old. And if you think about how much America has changed in just 250 years, a lot of times we don't cut the Israelites much slack when we're reading the book of Judges. We think, well, how can they do this? They fell so quickly. Well, just look how our country has, what it's done in the last 250 years. We've gone from starting a revolution over the tax on tea to not even knowing what the difference is between a man and a woman. Now we come to our third judge, Shamgar. Shamgar killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad. That's all we're told about Shamgar. Now an ox goad, just so you know, an ox goad is basically just a cattle prod. I grew up working cows when working them in the pens. When you're pushing cows through the pens, you'll use something we call a hot shot today. It's just a cattle prod that you poke the cattle with to get them to move where you want them to go. And in Shamgar's time, this was just basically a pointed stick that you would poke the oxen with to get them to keep moving in the direction you want them to go. And there's some debate about whether Shamgar was a judge or not. For the purpose of this study, we're going to go ahead and say that Shamgar is a judge. But just so you know, there is some deliberation out there about whether he is a judge or if this is just a mention in the book of Judges, like sort of a timestamp, like during the time of Shamgar, when Shamgar killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad. After Ehud's death, that was the second judge, there was 80 years of peace. The Israelites again did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord turned them over to a Canaanite king. The commander of his army was Sisera, who had 900 iron chariots. We know that there was 20 years of oppression after that. Verse 4, Deborah, the wife of Lapidoth, was a prophet who was judging Israel. So here we have a woman prophet who's also a judge. Verse 5, she would sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites would go to her for judgment. One day she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh, the land of Naphtali. She said to him, "This is what the Lord your God of Israel commands you. Call about 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun on Mount Tabor, and I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along his chariots and warriors to the Kishon River. There I will give you victory over him." Barak told her, "I will go, but only if you go with me." Verse 9, "Very well," she replied. "I will go with you, but you will receive no honor in this venture, for the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman." And I think by this time Barak is probably thinking that she's talking about herself, but that's not the case. Verse 14, Deborah said to Barak, "Get ready. This is the day the Lord will give you victory over Sisera, for the Lord is marching ahead of you." So Barak led his 10,000 warriors down the slopes of Mount Tabor into battle. When Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into panic, and Sisera leaped down from his chariot and escaped on foot. Then Barak chased the chariots and the enemy army all the way to Harosheth Goyim, killing all of the Sisera's warriors. Verse 17, meanwhile Sisera ran to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because Heber's family was on friendly terms with King Jabin of Hazor. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come into my tent, sir, come in. Don't be afraid." He went into her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. "Please give me some water," he said. "I'm thirsty." So she gave him some milk from a leather bag and covered him again. Verse 20, "Stand at the door of the tent," he told her. "If anybody comes in and asks you if there is anyone here, say no." But when Sisera fell asleep from exhaustion, Jael quietly crept up to him with a hammer and a tent peg in her hand. Then she drove the tent peg through his temple and into the ground, and so he died. When Barak came looking for Sisera, Jael went out to meet him. She said, "Come, and I will show you the man you're looking for." So he followed her into the tent and found Sisera lying there dead with the tent peg through his temple. So on that day, Israel saw God defeat Jabin the Canaanite. After this, there was peace in the land for 40 years. Then we get to Judges 6, and we talk about Gideon. So in verse 1, we're told that the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight again. So the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. Verse 8, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites. This is an unnamed prophet. So this isn't a prophet that's named. Deborah has been a prophet so far. She was named. This is an unnamed prophet. He said, so it's a male prophet, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of slavery in Egypt. I rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppress you. I drove out your enemies and gave you their land. I told you I'm the Lord your God. You must not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you now live. But you've not listened to me." Then the angel of the Lord, now this is the angel, came beneath the great tree of Ophrah, which belonged to Joash, the clan of Abiasar. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. And what that means is he's using an implement that's used to smash grapes to separate the heads of grain from the husks. And this is something that's usually done on a threshing floor. So that we know that during the time of Gideon, during this time when the Midianites were oppressing them, they had to keep any kind of threshing of grain in secret. And because the Midianites were rationing their food or taking their grain from them that they grew. Verse 13, Gideon says, "If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of the land of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites. Then the Lord turned to him and said, Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you. And he goes through these various tests. Each time the Lord proves he's really selected Gideon for this specific task. Then in verse 34, this is where we see Gideon lifted up. He says, Then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. He blew a ram's horn and as a call to arms, and the men of the clan of Abiasar came to him. He also sent messengers throughout Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, summoning their warriors, and all of them responded. He has the Lord prove it to him 2 more times through the use of a fleece. And this is just reflecting of how bad things have gotten in Israel. In verse 2, we're told that they have to hide in caves. Verse 3, they can't plant crops. When they do, they get destroyed. And this explains why he was threshing grain in a winepress. And verse 4 tells us all their livestock were taken. And verse 5, their land was stripped bare. You'll notice when the angel of the Lord is there, it's very distinct because the angel of the Lord accepts sacrifices. He accepts worship. Whereas the other angels, the lesser angels, the messenger angels, they don't accept sacrifice. And I'll let you in on a little hint. The angel of the Lord is Christ before he came to earth. He's the Word. So Gideon's army, throughout this whole interaction he has with God, it's whittled down from 32,000 to 300. So he's gone from 32,000 men that initially assembled to fight off the Midianites. Now he only has 300 men. That's 1% of the fighting force that he actually started with. It was just after midnight, after the changing of the guard, when Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the Midianite camp. Suddenly they blew the ram's horns and broke their clay jars. Then all 3 groups blew their horns and broke their jars. They held the blazing torches in their left hands and the horns in their right hands, and they all shouted, A sword for the Lord and for Gideon. Each man stood at his position around the camp and watched as all the Midianites rushed around in panic, shouting as they ran to escape. When the 300 Israelites blew the ram's horns, the Lord caused the warriors in the camp to fight against each other with their swords. So what we have here is a great psyop. So they had torches and they had these clay pots. So they smashed them, they showed the torches, and it made it look like there was way more men out there than there were. And with all the chaos going on and it being at dark, the men inside the camp start thinking that the Israelites who are up on top of the hill are already in their camp. Gideon then crossed the Jordan River with his 300 men, and though exhausted, they continued to chase the enemy. When they reached Succoth, Gideon asked the leaders of the town, Please give my warriors some food. They're very tired. I am chasing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. Verse 6, But the officials of Succoth said, Catch Zebah and Zalmunna first, and then we will feed your army. Verse 7, So Gideon said, After the Lord gives me victory over Zebah and Zalmunna, I will return and tear your flesh with the thorns and briars from the wilderness. Verse 8, From there Gideon went up to Peniel and again asked for food, but he got the same answer. So he said to the people of Peniel, After I return in victory, I will tear down this tower. Evidently there was a tower in Peniel. Verse 13, After this, Gideon returned from the battle by way of Harris Pass. There he captured a young man from Succoth and demanded that he write down the names of all the 70 officials and elders in the town. After the battle was won, Gideon then returned to Succoth and said to the leaders, Here are Zebah and Zalmunna. When we were here before, you taunted me, saying, Catch Zebah and Zalmunna first, and then we will feed your exhausted army. Then Gideon took the elders of the town and taught them a lesson, punishing them with thorns and briars from the wilderness. He also tore down the tower of Peniel and killed all the men in the town. In chapter 8, verse 22, Then the Israelites said to Gideon, Be our ruler. You and your son and your grandson will be our rulers, for you have rescued us from Midian. But Gideon replied, I will not rule over you, nor will my son. The Lord will rule over you. There's their king. Hello. The Lord will rule over you. However, I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from the plunder you collected from your fallen enemies. The enemies being Ishmaelites. Okay, they said gladly. So they spread out a cloak, and the weight of all the golden earrings ends up being 43 pounds worth. Verse 27, So Gideon made a sacred ephod from the gold and put it in Ophrah, his hometown. But soon all the Israelites prostituted themselves by worshiping it, and it became a trap for Gideon and his family. Now, if you remember back in the Torah, when we were reading through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, there was only one ephod, and that ephod is worn by the high priest. Officially, first it was Aaron, then it was Aaron's son. There's only supposed to be one ephod, and it was made at the direction of God. It was designed by God, and it was built by those two craftsmen who were divinely gifted with the ability to make such things. Throughout the rest of Gideon's lifetime, about 40 years, there was peace in the land. Then Gideon returned home. He had 70 sons born to him, and he had many wives. He also had a concubine in Shechem who gave birth to a son, whom he named Abimelech. Verse 33, as soon as Gideon died, the Israelites prostrated themselves by worshiping the images of Baal, making Baal-berith their god. Chapter 9, verse 1. One day, Gideon's son Abimelech went to Shechem to visit his uncles. So he goes and he convinces his uncles to make him the ruler over Shechem. He says, do you want to be ruled by all the 70 of Gideon's sons or by one man? And remember that I am your own flesh and blood, because his mother was from Shechem. So they support him in that. Verse 4, we're told that they gave him 70 silver coins from the temple of Baal-berith, which he used to hire some reckless troublemakers who agreed to follow him. And he went to his father's home at Ophrah, and there, on one stone, they killed all 70 of his half-brothers, the sons of Gideon. But the youngest brother, Jotham, escaped and hid. Then all the leading citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo called a meeting under the oak beside the pillar at Shechem and made Abimelech their king. Judges 9, verses 7 through 21, it says Jotham's parable in this Bible, but this is really like Jotham's curse. This is the brother that escaped, and he pronounces a curse on Abimelech. He says, once upon a time the trees decided to choose a king. First they said to the olive tree, be our king. But the olive tree refused, saying, should I quit producing the olive oil that blesses both God and people, just to wade back and forth over the trees? In verse 10, then they said to the fig tree, you be our king. But the fig tree also refused, saying, why should I quit producing my sweet fruit just to wade back and forth over the trees? Then they said to the grapevine, you be our king. But the grapevine also refused, saying, should I quit producing the wine that cheers both God and people just to wade back and forth over the trees? Then all the trees finally turned to the thorn bush and said, come, you be our king. And the thorn bush replied to the trees, if you truly want to make me your king, come and take shelter in my shade. If not, let fire come out from me and devour the cedars of Lebanon. And the cedars of Lebanon were these renowned trees, these great cedars. We would look in America at kind of like the redwood forest or the sequoia forest out west. These ancient trees were highly valued. What Jotham is saying, he's saying that they're just going to the lowest bidder as far as a ruler over them. And finally, they found somebody that did want to be king, but to be king, he's willing to burn down the entire forest, even the most prized parts of the forest. Jotham continued, now make sure you have acted honorably and in good faith by making Abimelech your king, and that you have done right by Gideon and all his descendants. Have you treated him with the honor he deserves for all he accomplished? For he fought for you and risked his life when he rescued you from the Midianites. But today you have revolted against my father and his descendants, killing his 70 sons on one stone, and you have chosen his slave, woman's son, Abimelech, to be your king just because he is your relative. If you have acted honorably and in good faith toward Gideon and his descendants today, then you may find joy in Abimelech, and he may find joy in you. But if you have not acted in good faith, then may fire come out from Abimelech and devour the leading citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo, and may fire come out from the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. Then Jotham escaped and lived in Beer because he was afraid of his brother Abimelech. And that actually happens. So Judges chapter 9 verses 22 through 57, the king turns on the Shechemites and the Shechemites turn on the king. Jotham's curse comes true. In verse 56, it summarizes, it says, in this way God punished Abimelech for the evil he had done against his father by murdering his 70 brothers. God also punished the men of Shechem for all their evil, so the curse of Jotham, son of Gideon, was fulfilled. not a well-known fact, the first king of Israel is actually Abimelech. But he wasn't actually a legitimate king, because in Deuteronomy 17:15, the Lord's very clear. He says, you will select the man the Lord your God chooses. Just like he was going to choose the place to put the Ark of the Covenant, the place where they were going to worship, where they were going to put their altar, he's also going to choose the king. And this wasn't God who chose this king. This was a king that the people chose. And just like we can see what happened when they chose to go into the land of Canaan on their own and didn't do it when God told them to do, on the first invasion attempt, it utterly failed. So if you add up all the judges and all the years that they were oppressed up to this point, you come up to 253 years. So we're 253 years into the judges era. We had the 5 judges, then the 3 years of Abimelech, and then we come to the 6th judge, which is Tola. And we're told that Tola judged for 23 years, and Tola was from the tribe of Issachar. Then the 7th judge, Jair, he judged for 22 years. He was from the tribe of Judah. After they were oppressed for 18 years, Jephthah became the judge, and then judged for 6 years. The 9th judge is Ibzan, who judged for 7 years from the tribe of Judah. Then we have an Elon, who was the 10th judge. He judged for 10 years. He was from the tribe of Zebulun. And then an 11th judge is Abdon, who judged for 8 years. He is from the tribe of Ephraim. And then we have the 12th judge, Samson. Samson is raised up after they've been oppressed by the Philistines for 40 years. Samson's from the tribe of Dan. He's also a Nazirite. If we look back to number 6, we'll remember that Samson being a Nazirite from birth, a Nazirite has to abide by certain restrictive laws. So they can't eat any fruit of the vine. They can't eat grapes. They can't drink wine. Nothing. They can't cut their hair for the time that they're in their Nazirite vow. And Samson being a Nazirite from birth, that means he can never cut his hair. And then they can't touch dead things. Per the law in Numbers, if they do touch something dead, they have to shave their head and renew the vow after a period of cleansing and then start all over. Samson was born to God-fearing parents from the tribe of Dan. We just talked about the angel of the Lord before with Gideon. Now the angel of the Lord appears to Manoah, which is Samson's father, and his mother, and basically tells them, hey, he's going to be a Nazirite, that Samson's going to be a Nazirite from birth. And then they make a sacrifice, and then this angel of the Lord accepts that. So we know that this is the Lord, not just a messenger angel that's speaking to them. And it's interesting that in verse 18 of chapter 13, he asks, why do you ask my name? The angel of the Lord replied, it's too wonderful for you to understand. In Genesis chapter 33, verse 29, Jacob asked the Lord, who he's been wrestling with, what his name is. And the Lord says, why do you want to know my name? Samson grows into adulthood, and then we find out that he has a little problem. He likes foreign women. And we're told way back in Deuteronomy chapter 7 that they're not to intermarry with any of the women that are in the land of Canaan. And that's specifically the kind of women that Samson likes. In Judges 14, one day when Samson was in Timnah, one of the Philistine women caught his eye. When he returned home, he told his father and mother, a young Philistine woman in Timnah caught my eye. I want to marry her. Get her for me. His mother and father objected, of course. Isn't there even one woman in our tribe or among all the Israelites you could marry? They asked, why must you go to the pagan Philistines to find a wife? But Samson told his father, get her for me. She looks good to me. Lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. His father and mother didn't realize the Lord was at work in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines who ruled over Israel at the time. Samson and his parents were going down to Timnah. A young lion suddenly attacked Samson near the vineyards of Timnah. At that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. This is the moment where Samson goes from being a regular judge to a judge that is lifted up. The Spirit of the Lord comes upon him, and he ripped the lion's jaw apart with his bare hands. He did it as easily as if it were a young goat, but he didn't tell his father or mother about it. And when Samson arrived in Timnah, he talked with the woman and was very pleased with her. Later, when he returned to Timnah for the wedding, he turned off the path to look at the carcass of the lion, and he found that a swarm of bees had made some honey in the carcass. He scooped some honey into his hands and ate it along the way. He also gave some to his father and mother, and they ate it. But he didn't tell them he had taken the honey from the carcass of the lion. At this point, if he hadn't already done it before now, he has broken his Nazirite vow. He has touched something dead. So at this point, per the law, he's supposed to shave his head and start all the way over with the vow, as far as the law goes. Samson just keeps on, and then he gives this honey, which is contaminated, which comes out of a dead carcass. He gives it to his parents as well. So he takes it even a step further. He's not only contaminating himself, making himself unclean, he's making his parents unclean as well, and they don't even know it. So Samson throws a party. So at this party, Samson gives 30 guys a riddle. And he says, if you can answer the riddle, I'll give you 30 sets of clothing. But if you don't answer the riddle, you have to give me 30 sets of clothing. Samson's wife comes to him in tears. Now these 30 men have now threatened to kill her and her family if they don't get the answer to the riddle. So she comes to him and says, you don't love me, you hate me, you have given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. Like basically she's saying that he don't trust her. I haven't even given the answer to my father and mother, he replied. Why should I tell you? So she cried whenever she was with him and kept it up for the rest of the celebration. At last, on the 7th day, he told her the answer because she was tormenting him with her nagging. She explained the riddle to the young men. So before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town came to Samson with the answer. Samson replied, if you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle. Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. Again, he went down to the town of Ashkelon, killed 30 men, took their belongings, and gave their clothing to the men. So he kept his word, but he committed murder to keep his word. So his wife was given in marriage to a man who had been Samson's best man at the wedding. Samson gets angry about this. He ties a bunch of foxes together and ties torches to their tails, lets them go in their fields and burns all their fields down. So they get angry. Samson ends up killing them all with a donkey's jawbone of a recently killed donkey, which was him touching another dead thing. Judges chapter 16 verse 4. Samson falls in love with a lady named Delilah who doesn't love him. And she finally gets him to reveal the secret of his strength. So after some prodding, he finally gives in to her. And she has his head shaved while his head is in her lap. After that, Samson loses his power. Who knew? The key to his power the whole time was the hair on his head. He's captured, he's blinded, and he's imprisoned. And his hair starts to grow back though. After trampling all over his status as a Nazirite and ignoring the law, basically living a life of autonomy and sin and rebellion by his own law, not by God's law, it's only within the last few moments of Samson's life that we see him really surrender to the Lord. And that's in verses 28 through 30. So Samson has been blinded, imprisoned, and he's brought out just to be like the jester in the court of the Philistines. We'll start in verse 23. The Philistine rulers held a great festival of offering sacrifices and praising their god Dagon. Dagon was kind of like a fish god. They said, our God has given us victory over our enemy Samson. When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, our God has delivered our enemy to us. The one who killed so many of us is now in our power. Half drunk by now, the people demanded, bring out Samson so he can amuse us. So he was brought from the prison to amuse them, and they had him stand between the pillars supporting the roof. Samson said to the young servant who was leading him by the hand, place my hands against the pillars that hold up the temple. Now remember, Samson's blind, so he has this little helper that's helping him along, and he says, place my hands on the pillars that hold up the temple. I want to rest them. Now the temple was completely filled with the people. All the Philistine rulers were there, and there were about 3,000 men and women on the roof who were watching as Samson amused them. Then Samson prayed to the Lord. This is where we see Samson really surrenders to God here. He's lived a life of rebellion, and here still accomplishing God's purposes, but we see him here where he really surrenders to the Lord. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, Sovereign Lord, remember me again. O God, please strengthen me just one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my 2 eyes. Then Samson put his hands on the 2 center pillars that held up the temple, pushing against them with both hands. He prayed, let me die with the Philistines. And the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had during his entire lifetime. Samson had judged Israel for 20 years. Samson was the 12th judge of the book of Judges. Judges 17 and 18, Micah from Ephraim, he steals 1,100 pieces of silver from his mother. And after he returns them to her, she dedicates them to the Lord. In honor of her son, the thief, she has an idol made. So Micah sets up a shrine in his house, and then he brings other idols, and he installs one of his sons as his personal priest. This doesn't sound anything like Deuteronomy. Here the author of Judges wants to remind us in verse 6, in those days Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Eventually a Levite comes to town, and Micah convinces this Levite to become his personal priest. We don't even know if this Levite is a descendant of Aaron. We just know that he comes from the tribe of Levi. He could have been like the guy that was in charge of keeping the stands for the poles to hold up the tabernacle or something. But now Micah feels more secure about his sinful idolatry with this idol that he set up and all this, because he has a Levite as a priest. But what kind of priest would just willy-nilly become a priest in somebody's house for working for silver as his personal priest, not even being affiliated with the tabernacle, not affiliated with the law, but now he is working in this shrine with this idol that this guy has made in his own house. And along comes the tribe of Dan. So Dan was allotted a land next to Benjamin. If you remember from last week, Benjamin and Dan were sandwiched in between Judah on the south and Ephraim on the north. And if you remember back in Judges 1 verse 34-35, Dan was never actually able to conquer the whole of their allotted land. So you have this whole tribe of Israel, they're crammed into a little space and they've never actually been able to conquer the rest of their land there. And they're looking for a new place to live. So they send 5 warriors to scout out a new place to settle. On their way to where they're going, they stay at Micah's house. Remember, this is the guy with the idol and his personal priest. They got to know the priest, and the priest blesses them on their way, and they leave and they end up way up north. They return back to their land where their people are, and they tell them, hey, there's really fertile land up there and it's defenseless. Let's go up there and take it. So on their way up north to this land that they're gonna take, not the land that was allotted to them, they go by Micah's house. In verse 14 of chapter 18 says, the 5 men who have scouted out the land around Laish explained to the others, these buildings contain a sacred ephod, as well as some household idol, a carved image, and a cast idol. What do you think we should do? Then the 5 men turned off the road and went over to Micah's house, where the young Levite lived, and greeted him kindly. As the 600 armed warriors from the tribe of Dan stood at the entrance of the gate, the 5 scouts entered the shrine and removed the carved image, the sacred ephod, the household idols, and the cast idol. Meanwhile, the priests were standing at the gate with 600 armed warriors. When the priest saw the men carrying all the sacred objects out of Micah's shrine, he said, what are you doing? Be quiet and come with us, they said. Be a father and a priest to all of us. Isn't it better to be a priest for an entire tribe and a clan of Israel than for the household of just one man? So the priest happily goes with them. And then in verse 30 we see that they set up the carved image that Micah had made after he stole money from his mom, and she paid to get an idol made in his honor. And they appointed Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, as their priest. It's only supposed to be descendants of Aaron, but okay. This family continued as priests for the tribe of Dan until the exile. So Micah's carved image was worshipped by the tribe of Dan as long as the tabernacle of God remained at Shiloh. Referring back to our satellite Bible atlas, remember this green area here, the light green area, was the land that they had actually conquered. The dark green area was the land that they had left to conquer that they didn't. And you see how Dan didn't actually conquer. This was the area they were given. They didn't actually conquer all of that area. So they actually move up north and they make a town there named Dan. So they leave this area in the south and they actually move up north. So this is Dan 1 and Dan 2. We're 300 years into the Judges era by now, and if you can't tell, this generation of Israelites looks nothing like the second generation that conquered the land of Canaan, where they've enjoyed the plentifulness and the security that God has provided them. This generation looks nothing like that generation. And this is where I want to put a disclaimer. If you have children watching this, you might want to censor this part, because this is maybe one of the most disturbing passages in the Bible here in Judges 19. Now in those days Israel had no king. It wants to remind us again. There was a man from the tribe of Levi living in a remote area of the hill country of Ephraim. One day he brought home a woman from Bethlehem in Judah to be his concubine. So it's possible that this is the same priest we were just talking about in the previous passage. He moved up north with the tribe of Dan. So if this is the same priest, this is during the time that he lived in the south, before he moved up north with the Danites. So this priest concubine escaped, and she travels back to her father's house. The priest goes in to get her from there, and he's traveling back to Ephraim. They decide to stay in Gibeah, which is in the territory of Benjamin. So he was down in Judah. He's got to cross over the land of Benjamin to get to the land of Ephraim, where he's from. In verse 16 we're told that that evening an old man came from his work in the fields. He was from the hill country of Ephraim. He's from the same place that the Levite is from. He was living in Gibeah, where the people were from the tribe of Benjamin. When he saw the travelers sitting in the town square, he asked them where they were from and where they were going. "We have been in Bethlehem in Judah," the man replied. "We are on our way to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, which is my home. I traveled to Bethlehem and now I'm returning home. But no one has taken us in for the night, even though we have everything we need. We have straw and feed for our donkeys and plenty of bread and wine for ourselves." "You're welcome to stay with me," the old man said. "I will give you anything you might need, but whatever you do, don't spend the night in the square." So he took them home with him and fed the donkeys, and after they washed their feet, they ate and drank together. While they were enjoying themselves, a crowd of troublemakers from the town surrounded the house, and they began beating at the door and shouting to the old man, "Bring out the man who is staying with you so we can have sex with him." Starting to sound a lot like Sodom in Genesis 19. Verse 23, the old man stepped outside to talk to them. "No, my brothers, don't do such an evil thing, for this man is a guest at my house, and such a thing would be shameful. Here, take my virgin daughter and this man's concubine, and I'll bring them out to you, and you can abuse them and do whatever you like, but don't do such a shameful thing to this man." So similarities here to Sodom. The man that lives in the home asked them not to stay in the square, the same way that Lot implored the angels that were going to destroy Sodom not to stay in the square. Lot offers his daughters in place of the angelic guests. And in the same way, that's kind of just happened, although these ain't angels that they're harboring. It's almost the same words in verse 22b, where he says, "Bring out the man who is staying with you so we can have sex with him." This is almost the same exact verbiage that is in Genesis 19. So we've seen this before, and it's really sad because Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin, has become Sodom. And this is to illustrate how far they have fallen. They've gone from being a nation of priests who depended on God, who marched in his army as they overtook Canaan, to now they are Sodom. Benjamin was the son that Rachel died to give birth to. She died giving birth to Benjamin. And this is what's become of his descendants. Here's where it gets crazy. So the Levite throws his concubine out the door, and then she is raped to death brutally. all night. And they find her the next morning on the doorstep. Verse 28, he says, "Get up, let's go." But there's no answer. So he put her body on his donkey and took her home. And when he got home, he took a knife and cut his concubine's body into 12 pieces. Then he sent one piece to each tribe throughout all the territory of Israel. And everyone who saw it said, "Such a horrible crime has been committed in all the time since Israel left Egypt. Think about it. What are we going to do? Who's going to speak up?" This is kind of familiar. This is kind of similar to the times we live in, because we can see atrocities go on every day. And with television, and especially with cell phones now, we're just become very hard to a lot of very sinful things that are going on in the world, and a lot of atrocious acts that are going on. But every now and then there will be this one thing that just upsets us, and we'll have riots, and we'll talk of injustice, and and it'll get spun by one political party or another to have some kind of political movement go on, and never mind all the other thousands of evil acts we see go on a daily basis. Never mind all that. We just focus on this one thing. And that's exactly what's happening here, is now all of Israel is focusing on this one woman who has been raped and cut into 12 pieces. And as gross and as horrible as that is, the book of Judges has demonstrated what kind of other things have gone on, what other kind of things go on a daily basis during these 300 years of Judges. So the 12 tribes unite, and 400,000 warriors assemble. These 400,000 warriors go down, and they tell the people in Benjamin to give up the men that are guilty of this. But they refuse. And because of this, they basically wipe out the whole tribe of Benjamin. Only 600 men are left by the end of chapter 20, verse 47. So they go and they murder almost a whole tribe. Only 600 are left. And then they're like, uh-oh, well, we don't want the tribe to actually disappear, so now we have to find women, because we've killed all your women. So now we have to go find women for you. So then they go kill other Israelites and take their women. And there's still not enough. They go to another place at a festival that they have at Shiloh, and all the women that come out dancing in celebration, they take those women too. So this is like a mob that's gone and wiped out a whole people because of an injustice that they've seen, while ignoring all the other evils that they see on a daily basis. And now, in an effort to make this wrong a right, this atrocious act that was done to this woman, in an effort to make that right, they've gone and killed and slaughtered thousands and thousands of others. We can see this in our own time. This still happens today. We can see ourselves in all of this. So the Judges era lasts for around 300 years. The third generation threw off all the ways that they were taught by their ancestors. The first generation that left Egypt, the second generation that conquered the land of Canaan, they threw off all their ways, right? Because that third generation grew up in this state of security and privilege. And they didn't have to work for anything in this land, because it was just provided for them. It was a blessed land. It was a land that God provided for them, that flowed with milk and honey. When they tilled the ground, it would yield good fruits for them. And they lived in this status of privilege. And this third generation was brought up in this status of privilege. And you see how quickly they started worshiping the other gods. And now, 300 years later, we see that they've just become Sodom. They're no better than they were 1,000 years earlier. This is a representation of how quickly a society can fall. A society that is built on biblical principles, that has a high status morality, can fall in such a short amount of time just because they disobey God. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This is a statement that you hear every now and then. This is my truth, but that's your truth. And that's what we call subjectivism. That's saying that there is no concrete objective truth. There's no basis for morality besides what is right for you. And that is completely false. Completely false. there is a truth. There is an objective truth that can't be altered. It's written down in the Bible. When the truth is allowed to be whatever you want it to be, anything can happen. There's only one truth, and we can depend on it. It doesn't come from science or political parties. It comes from God's Word. We can see here in the book of Judges what happens when we reject God. In fact, we can see it in our own time. In this age, we celebrate the murder of innocents, the mutilation of children's identities and bodies. We celebrate being Sodom. We're no different than the tribe of Benjamin in this story. Think about your ancestors. It took 1,000 generations to labor, toil, and sacrifice for you to have the blessings that you have. They worked, they died, they bled, they did without, so that you could be in the time and be in the privilege that you now live. What are you going to do with it? You can sit back and be complacent. You can bring your children up in that sense of entitledness, or you can stay close to God, seek Him, and hold on to Him when you find Him. What are you going to do with the gift God has given you? Jesus died so that you could live and live abundantly. Chasing the things of this world will only lead you to death. Make it count and put God at your center. That's all for this week. We'll see you next week. We're going to read the book of Ruth, and then we're going to get into 1 Samuel. Have a good week, everybody.